time for my second trip as I practice this Nessmuk style of camping, where I go for comfort rather than minimalism. So I'm going to a different spot from my last trip, even though, by the way, both of these are close to my home. These are practices to get familiar with my gear and my setup, so it's not about going out and camping, and I don't want to try to put that across as though that's what I'm doing. The books that I was first inspired by are these characters who pretty much rough it, and that's really what most of the guys out on the frontier did. We have this idea that they were all expert bushcrafters, and they weren't. They went out and they were more tough than they were skilled at camping. That's my understanding of it. And that's why Nessmuk in his book, he even refers oftentimes to what's the norm, and he broke away from the norm and learned his own style. So that's a real mindset change to go from that into Nessmuk style, where Nessmuk style is about being comfortable. And he doesn't outright list a system. He writes about a system in his story form. So I went through and wrote that as a bullet point. So the system that I'm currently working off of is first going in and leveling a bed area, and then going and cutting the fir boughs or whatever vegetation you're going to lay down to get you off the ground. So setting up your bed. And then going and cutting firewood would be the next step. And after the firewood would be the shelter. So I cut this one for the bipod first. And then rocks for a kitchen area and setting up, I call it a kitchen area, to put your food and your utensils and stuff. Then the fire pit. After that would be setting up the system for burning logs all night without having to keep adding them, which I can't really do out here. One of my challenges is it's almost all sagebrush around here, but when I get up into the mountains, then I can. So right now I kind of have to nix some of these parts that I'll add when I start going to the mountains. So after that, then you get your fire going. And for me, I would start my dried food soaking in water. I've found that by soaking it first before cooking it, it helps a whole lot. So that's the system that I'm practicing. I'm not saying that's the best system. There's probably good arguments for other systems. But a lot of us probably all know having a system is way better than having no system. Because then I'm not scratching my head, well, what do I do next? I set up my tent, as I have in the past, but I didn't really bring wind blocks. And we haven't had a lot of wind, but of course this day that I go out, it turns out it's windy and snowy. Well, no problem, because that sounds like it's gonna look really cool in the video. And as I was digging out my bed and digging out my fire pit, I was kind of enjoying the rugged, rough aspect of it. My hands were frozen because the dirt was wet and cold, but I was just loving the raw, animal, wild side nature of it. So I got my fire going and decided to get started on some food. But what I found was I underestimated the difficulty of the wind. So I was constantly getting smoke in my face. I was just a mess of tears and snot coming out of my eyes and my nose, and it was really uncomfortable. I was plenty warm with the size of fire that I had, but I couldn't deal with the smoke. So then I'd get out to get out of the smoke, but then I'd get cold. I really wasn't counting on wind like this. So I think I gotta go home and really think this over. I mean, would I really put that much work into a chimney for just an overnight camp? Is that the way to go? Granted, I think with a shovel it'd only take me an hour, and if it were earlier, it would certainly be worthwhile. But at this point, it's going to be dark pretty soon. And I just kind of think this was a little more than I was ready for. And again, if it were just me and I didn't have to worry about these animals, it'd be a little easier. So now what I could have done was just eaten my food and wrapped up in my tarp instead of using a shelter, and I could have toughed it out. But that's not the method I'm going for. I'm going for a comfortable method that Nessmuk talks about. So I could have toughed it out, but another thing I do is that I camp with my animals, with my goats and my dogs. Well, my little dog, Sparta, she's about 25 pounds, she gets cold pretty easy. And my goats get cold. So as I'm sitting there debating over this, what I should do, it just kind of is overwhelming on me that I need to just suck up my pride and call it a loss, go home where I can keep my animals warm and keep me warm, and think it over and figure out what I get to learn from this. So I had to think it over. I chatted with a friend about the issue. I really thought over why it happened, what I was about, and of course, ultimately it turned into a great experience. For one, it helped me be humble, to have more of a reverent respect for weather changes and for what I'm doing. I started thinking back to my camp from last year and how I had effectively blocked out the wind with that same tent that I had already set up. So I had a renewed desire to go out and make that work. And I did. This is the best setup I've done. And I've got snow again, so that makes me happy. A lot less wind, but who knows, maybe we'll get some more and I can actually see how well this works. I'll give you a tour. So I decided to go back to what I did last year that worked, and that was attaching these wind blocks to the side. So I just stitched it up here and here. And these tarps are all going to be replaced, so even though stitching isn't ideal, it'll eventually make holes. In the next ones, I'll probably just put grommets where I know that I want them. So on this side, I actually had these safety pins that I used. And then I did like I did last year and used a bipod to hold it out. This is my hemp tarp, which was also connected with a safety pin. The wind has been coming from that way, which is weird for around here, but that's why it's all designed to flow with the wind this way. This creates a second shelter for anything that I want to stash away or my dog. And then on this side, this is the only opening I have, as I put a rock in the tarp and tied it to my bipod, which is holding it all up. So if I really need to, I don't know if I need to close that up, we'll see, but I need a way to get in and out. So I'm pretty happy. Now I just need some wind and a fire and see how it all works. Okay, baby, go. My bed I'm super excited about because these two sheepskins that I put in. So I've got two sheepskins laid out, and so I'll have one wool blanket under me and two on top. I'm using my hemp sheet here. That means I got to go find a different sheet to lay over my shoulders and head, since I'm allergic to the wool blankets and they give me a headache. So that's why these things aren't really permanent. They're just to experiment as I figure out this shelter system. Last year I had this setup up, and I had imagined putting wings out here that could go around my bipod, and with that rope they could just go to the rope and I wouldn't need to use a second tarp here potentially. That's the idea. So when I get more wind and I'm able to make sure this works, that just might be the tent that I end up setting up. I could still pack with it because they'd fold in and I could use that to pack. So shelter and bed are pretty good. My fire pit I had set up the other day when I went back home, and so it should be reflecting heat really well. Where I am, it's all these rocks that blow up like shrapnel if you get them too hot. And so that's kind of a challenge that I deal with here for setting up a cooking area. So it's gonna be the coldest that I've camped out in. I think my phone says 19 degrees, and usually where I am, it's a few degrees colder. So it might be around 15 tonight. I've decided I don't really plan on camping with my goats. I'm pretty sure it's now illegal. So that's frustrating, but it is what it is. So the point is, I'm gonna go lock my goats up tonight so that they can stay warm. And then my little dog that gets cold, I'm gonna put her in my cabin tonight also, so she can stay warm. She sleeps on my bed. And then I don't have to worry about animals being cold. I'm really excited about how it's working out. After that failure the other day, that was good. It gave me a lot of more of a humility and a respect for what I'm doing. I had to take my own advice and kind of slow down and focus on each step. And so today I started on this shelter yesterday, finished it today, and like I've said, I'm happy with it. Shoot. Well, it's 2 a.m. and my phone says it's 15 degrees, which means it could be as low as 12 degrees because it's usually off a little bit. I can't stay warm I can't tell if it's coming off the ground, as in not enough padding, or if it's just not adequate, but I can't keep my bed warm inside. I thought about bringing my dog in, but she didn't really want much to do with that. She's out there eating snow because she's thirsty and everything's frozen. Maybe I can thaw out my water and give her some. So, I don't know if I'll just sit here and have a fire till morning, or what I'm gonna do. So I fell back to sleep about 3:30 and slept till 5:09 and was freezing. I'm pretty sure I overestimated the effectiveness of those sheepskins. I've got 3 layers of wool and a sheepskin thickness underneath me, and yet I was freezing. My feet were particularly freezing, and legs. And I tried getting my dog in here. I held on to her, but my feet were still frozen, and she didn't like that anyway, and eventually when she felt like she could, she went away. But I got some tea going and still had some firewood left too. If I hadn't had that fire last night, I would have had more than enough firewood. As it is, I've got just enough. I was able to heat up some tea, and I'm gonna fry some rice that's left over. So I guess it would have been worthwhile to cut some sagebrush and put it under my bed, but I also don't like to cut that sagebrush. Maybe 15 degrees is a little much for here, I don't know. Well, I think I'll just burn up the rest of my firewood and eat a little food and head on back. So, I had an overnight. I wouldn't call it a Nessmuk success. As somebody mentioned in the comments, when I said that Nessmuk wouldn't be proud of my results, he would be proud of the route that I'm going down. And so I haven't attained it yet. I was frozen last night, so I got to figure out my bedding for that kind of weather. It's not very often that it gets down to 15 degrees around here. It's not very often that it gets below the 20s. So it was a great experience, and I'm glad I did it so that I can figure out what I did wrong and what I need to do next time, because that was not a comfortable experience. So all of this week was a great experience. Lots of humbling, lots of respect for what I'm doing. Lots of learning to slow down and do it right. I think I'm happy with that shelter. I would like to design one that's got the wind blocks already added to it and that are already attached. And then I'll have my shelter just ready to go and figure out the bedding. So it's been excellent. I left my tent up. I'm hoping for the next few days that we get some wind, or in the next few days, I'm hoping that we get some wind so I can go over there and start a fire and make some coffee and see how well it does when there's actual wind. So I'm going to do that, and then after a few days I'll take it down and go set up another camp spot and see if I can get this down to that to where my setup is only about 2 hours. I think I could set the tent structure up in half an hour once I've got it down. So maybe gathering wood, laying out the bed and the cooking area, maybe I can get that down to where it's all under 2 hours. That's the goal. So thanks for coming along, folks. I really enjoy all the comments on Reddit and on YouTube. Thanks, everybody. And I'll just keep kicking these out. Thanks for watching.